Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to bring your attention to where you can find this because I realized the worksheets and guides seems to have had some problems. So you see here where it says essay structure and sample essay, sample works cited page. This gives you a lot of information. This here is clustered as like things that we talked about in week one. I realized that some of you weren't there in week one, so that might be really helpful. This is more week two, week three, and week four. And this is all about language here. So I kind of try to put language stuff together. All this here is language stuff. And then here, this is like auxiliary stuff that's just really useful. More advanced stuff, I would say, than what's above. So everything that I'm going to talk about now is taken from essay structure. Um, and this is something I've developed over the years. And I wanted to specifically focus on right now the introduction because I feel like the introduction is where a lot of the magic happens. And a good way to think about the introduction, and I'm going to put a comment here, and you can write this in your own notes. Introductions introduce information and is more about information than any content related ideas. And what I mean by that is to say that you don't need to put any quotes or any focusing on your main ideas quite yet. You're just kind of summarizing. So the introduction is much more like a map towards where you're going. You're laying everything out. You're like, here's what we're going to talk about in paragraph one, paragraph two, paragraph three. You're introducing the author. You're introducing things that we need to know. And never assume that the reader knows something in advance. All right, so the first thing you need to do is have a hook. I'm actually going to get rid of the word sentence here because it could also be in the sense of a question, and it grabs the reader's attention and it brings you as well as the reader into your main subject. What is your main subject? In this case, I'm referring to Essay 2, which is about invisible borders. So you can say, what is an invisible border, right? Thank goodness for computers, they can correct everything for you. Invisible border. What kind of boundaries do others keep inside themselves? Here's something you can do. I'm going to put this as a note here. Add keywords from lecture. I use the word assumption quite a bit because people make assumptions naturally, right? I kept talking about how people naturally make assumptions. So you can use a word like that throughout your essay to kind of always remind the reader, hey, this is about invisible borders. This is about assumptions. Another key word that I kept using is the word society. So you could repeat some of these words throughout your essay, and it really brings the reader back to what it is that your main subject is about. Now, this second part here is so very important. Please introduce the author and the essay and the examples down below. In this case, you want to first specify the author's name, and please use the full name. You definitely need to write that down. Please use the full name the first time only. After this, use only the last name, in this case, Orwell. And then, this is another important thing. There are different kinds of writing styles. There are essays, there are movies, films, short stories, fiction, non-fiction, cultural narratives. So there are so many different types of writing. So in the introduction, you want to be specific to what it is that you're writing about. This shows that you have the ability to distinguish between different kinds of writing. This is very important for college level writing because right after this is an MLA thing as well. You want to add the title. And depending on this here, and I'm going to put another comment, essays, short stories are in quotation marks. and underneath it, films, novels, such as Annihilation and District 9, use italics. Okay? So keep that in mind. And notice that here it says with brief summary. So this last part here is very important because here is where a teacher is testing you. Okay? It's a very brief test. It's what we call level 1 reading, which is identify the author's thesis and add it to your essay. This shows to the instructor you not only read this essay, you discovered what the thesis was, the main argument. That's why we want you to introduce everything, because we want to see, do you know who the author is? Do you know what you're reading? Are you reading an essay or are you reading a novel? Can you distinguish between MLA format for a short story versus a novel? And then also, can you identify the thesis? So these 4 components are extremely, extremely important. And students oftentimes forget them because it seems so obvious, because you've looked at this essay, you've looked at the story 10, 15, 20 times already. But remember, the teacher is always testing you on everything that you do. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is focus on the main topics of the essay. And this is, I'm going to put again, summary. And you'll find out that in the introduction, a lot of what you're doing is you're summarizing, you're prepping your reader for what it is that you actually want to say. And this is why I call it the map or GPS of your paper. Notice that it's main topics. So in longer papers, main topics may only be 3 to 4 main ideas, but you might have 5 or 6 body paragraphs, right? So it's not every single body paragraph. I'm going to say that again. It doesn't have to be every body paragraph, just the very central focus ideas. In this essay, for example, I'm talking about 3 things: racial barriers, invisible walls, and stereotypes. 3 things. And notice the order that I put them in. I'm going to make a note about this. Put body paragraph in order. In other words, if you started with racial barriers, focus on racial barriers first. If you put invisible borders next, talk about invisible borders next. Stereotypes, talk about stereotypes next. So whatever you put here, be aware that the reader will expect you to follow your own logic. So you may have to revise this after you have finished writing your paper, okay? This is why revision is so important, because you do not want someone to say, well, wait a minute, you talked about this in the introduction in this order, but in the actual essay you went in a different order. This becomes an issue with organization, okay? So be sure that you are organized, and that always happens by looking at your essay and revising it. Okay, this next part here is the most important, and we focused on this early on, and most teachers focus on this all the time. The thesis is the key aspect to what you want to say and give supporting reasons. Now, in an essay like this, especially on invisible borders, I'm going to add a certain thing called a solution. This is going to help you get the A. I'm going to show you this right here, this first part of the sentence. If I use this, just this alone, thesis is already a D or a C. Let's look at what it says. Although personal boundaries are necessary, this lets me know you're talking about personal boundaries. It is important that people consider walls they put around them and why they are doing it. This now is a B thesis, because what is it doing? It tells me you're talking about personal boundaries and you gave 2 supporting reasons. They put up walls around them and they need to understand why they're doing it. However, and here's the key aspect to how you can get an A, especially when we're talking about things with society. Oftentimes, you can provide a solution to your argument, and this expands and enhances your essay. Now, let's look at this second sentence here. If these walls are broken down, here is the end result and the solution. I'm going to actually put here, you can also use the word result slash solution. If these walls are broken down, it can help people alter the shape in which our minds shape ourselves and the future of society. I'm going to add of society. Okay. Now that I've written that, now I've gotten an A. So do you see how I kind of went through that? Just by starting with that one spot, I already had a D or C. Then you're expanding it. You've gotten a B. Now, this third part, you've got yourself an A. So it is a process. You have to add all these things together. And when you do, when you mix it all together, when you bring it together, that's what's going to help you synthesize and get an A. The sample introduction is here below so that you can pay attention to this and look at it and look at the way that it's shaped. And you can see, let's see, how many sentences is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. I actually added this one, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is a count of 8 sentences. So I would say um, if we give or take, it should be a minimum of 5 sentences. An introduction should have a minimum of 5 sentences. If it has anything less than 5, you're probably missing something. So I hope this helps you. Thank you.